a logical and a scientific approach. Formulate a proper hypothesis depends on your experience, your logical insights, right? So this is something you will have to critically understand what you reach. So that's the second thing, which is uh, very important when you create a hypothesis. And the last thing which I'll discuss today before I close is hypothesis testing. How do you test a hypothesis? When the purpose of research is to test a research hypothesis, it is normally termed as hypothesis testing research. It can be experimental. In sciences, you have a lot of, not just in sciences, in social sciences, humanities also, there are a lot of experimental techniques. Yeah. So it can be experimental design or a non-experimental design, research in which independent variable is manipulated in terms of experimental hypothesis testing research, and research in which an independent variable is not manipulated. It's called a non-experimental hypothesis. All right. So to test a hypothesis, three, four things are important. Firstly, the level of significance. This is a very important concept in the context of hypothesis testing. It's always some percentage, usually 5%, which should be chosen with great care, thought, and reason to be tested. Right. Then the second important factor is the criteria for rejecting a sort of a various hypotheses may differ. I would not enter into detail because I'm not going into too complex null hypothesis and other things. The declaration of rule or test of hypothesis, again, given a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis, we make a rule which is known as a decision rule, right? Then there are tail tests and other tests also. There can be errors in testing your hypothesis, right? And if there are errors in testing your hypothesis, partly because of various reasons, you have a different sample size, a fixed sample size, whatever, but that brings you again to go back to your hypothesis and reformulate your hypothesis. That's the only way. But testing a hypothesis, one must make all possible efforts to make a very adequate balance between your various variables. Then only it becomes easy for you to test a hypothesis. But as I said, in a research proposal, your introduction, how you write your introduction, how you find various gaps, how you propose your hypothesis or your research question, all goes into, but in a very simple and modest language through which you can communicate with your reader. I think that's the beauty of a good research proposal, a good introduction and a hypothesis. I'll stop here. I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was very informative and very insightful. And we have few questions. So I'll take the first question from Amit Kumar. He is a PhD researcher, Department of English from Garhwal Central University. And his question is, how do you differentiate research questions and thesis statement? So your opinion on that, please.
See, I think any research proposal can have either research questions or a hypothesis or a thesis statement, whatever you call. As I said, I prefer my students, right? Because it's very difficult to, as I said, to have a hypothesis or a thesis statement, what we call, is a very rigorous process, right? And not very often at the early stages of PhD, when we are asked to submit our research proposals, that we don't come up with a very great formulation of a hypothesis. So to simplify the procedures, what I normally do is we prefer research questions, but either way, I mean, depending on how much Americans normally, in American academia, you will always see a research question than a hypothesis. Right? The opening line in any article would be, say, for example, if there is an arms control negotiation, how did two countries achieve consensus on an arms control agreement? That's how they question and they start there, right? But it depends on. I mean, you shouldn't be having both. Either you go for hypothesis or you go for research questions. That's my submission.
Thank you, sir. So another question is coming from Madhumita Dev. She says, she asks, what is the difference between normal writing, which is used to communicate any idea or story or incident, versus academic writing? Difference between normal writing and academic writing, and can one really use simple language for academic purpose? Although you did answer that question, but a little elaboration would really help us.
Normally, in academic writing, you use concepts, you use say ideas, you use theories, right? My own approach would be because in the end, whatever you publish, right, has to go uh, say to the masses, and this is not just very specific to any say to writing only. Any form wherein you communicate, any medium through which you communicate, whether be it film or say whether be it writing, whether be it theater or music, for example, your communication has to be kept at the simplest. Then only you will have a larger audience. Say, for example, if you are writing a research paper for an academic journal, fair enough. I mean, you can still go with, say, sort of a normal academic jargons which we use. But assuming we write a book, say, for example, right, a book which is not a fiction book, which is based on research, but we want a larger readership for that book. Right? How do you do? It's not that only those who are trained, who have PhDs, are going to read it. It's also a normal interested reader who is going to read it. Say, I can give you examples. When you visit, say, the airports, you have a section on books, right? HarperCollins, Penguin, and all. Look at the type of writing which they prefer. They are also well researched books, the non fiction ones. Therefore, I always advise my students that if you are going for a academic writing which has to do with book, or say a longer version, maybe possibly a monograph, you will have to break down the very complex academic concepts into simpler ones, which is very much possible, right? Because it's also going to a non-specialized readership. Obviously, I mean, if it's only restricted, limited to a very sort of a academic readership, fair enough. But it has to go beyond also, right? So I always prefer a very simple writing. Even a academic writing can be made simple.
Right, sir. So another question is from Amna Ahmed, and she's asking. She says she has divided the question into two parts. That what references can be used to develop a broad understanding about academic writing for research, and do we follow the same academic structure for different type of research studies? If not, how to know the different genres required for different research studies?
I think, I mean, the previous speaker also had answered this question. If the first way is that you will have to identify the journals wherein you are interested to write. So that's what you say the targeted way of. So I think that's the only way. Otherwise, I mean, you can Google, you can ask your research supervisors as to which are basically the journals, and depending on at what level you actually stand, right? That's how you will have to identify the journals where, wherein you propose to write.
Right, sir. The next we have from Abdul Rahman. He asks, how can we decide which tools to use to test the hypothesis?
It actually goes back to your research questions. Your research questions only will decide uh, the theoretical framework of the study, how you approach, how you want to answer this, and also the tools. So there are no clear-cut answers. If you ask me from discipline of international relations or national security studies, I can suggest you some. But uh, as I said, from economics to sociology to psychology, this may vary from discipline to discipline. But as I said, it will be primarily your research questions which will decide your tools.
Yes, and Premlata Srivastav, she's also a scholar. She's written or suggested hypothesis should be in qualitative research. If yes, then how to create? That's an impending question. So, what would you say on that?
As I said, you have to have a good background knowledge before you work on a hypothesis, right?
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, the best way is to go for research questions. That's the simplest way.
Sure, sir. Then we have Supriya Lamba. She asks, can we have 15 interviews, triangulation approach as a part of Nivivo analysis for mixed method in thesis writing?
Yes, obviously, as I said, depending on your research questions, you can go for. Triangulation is again a very important method, uh, but you will have to. It will actually come from your research questions only. Whether those research questions require this particular tool for analysis.
Okay, sir. Then we have many questions coming in actually. We have Vandana Yadav. She's a research scholar from Manipal University, Jaipur. She's asking how to do a chapter plan. What are the necessary things which should be included in chapter one?
Uh, I think it's a very long answer for this question. Depending on your research questions, you create a framework of analysis. And then subsequently, in any proposal, whether be it a PhD or a MPhil or a research proposal, you define as the scope of your study. The scope of your study is where you use your tools to test, right? I mean, depend, and there can be many ways of looking into a research question, particularly in social sciences. All right. The scope of your study indeed defines your chapterization. One has to be very, very clear. Your research question scope leads to your chapterization. Right. So if there are three, four chapters which you are, go back, look to your research proposal, look for what exactly is the scope, and from there only you will have to necessarily derive your chapters.
Very true, sir. Then we have Saurabh Pandey. He is asking, are questionnaires only way to test hypothesis? Are they not biased? And SPSS can be used for same questions.
See, SPSS is an important thing. Depending on which area you are working on. Normally, students of economics, statistics, geography go for this particular tool. But there are other tools which are used in other disciplines. So please understand in which area what you are actually researching on. So if you are in geography, population studies, regional studies, you are doing some statistical analysis, I think SPSS. But there are n number of other tools now, uh, yeah, which are which can actually take care of SPSS.
Okay. All right, sir. I have a personal question actually. I would want to ask that. So, there's a quote from Albert Einstein. He says that if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute resolving it.
Yes.
So, what is the, I mean, first of all, do you agree with the statement in today's era? And then what is the right problem actually? Because a mind generates so many ideas, but which one is the right thought, which probably is a problem statement and which needs solution?
Just give me a second.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
हेलो. नहीं नहीं, हम ये लेक्चर खत्म कर रहे हैं ना. हमने आपसे बताया था एक लेक्चर में है. हाँ, तो हम आते हैं. हम क्योंकि ये अरे बीच में एकदम लेक्चर में, राइट. हाँ, 5 मिनट में खत्म हो जाए.
Yes, sir. Should I repeat?
Yeah. No. I've got your question. And let me put it in context of a research proposal. Right. When I emphasize that a good research proposal is the one which will actually help you do good research or a final thesis, right? But in the first place, your proposal has to be good. A well-written research proposal actually minimizes your effort to write your thesis. So if you ask me, if my research proposal is good, actually it's the superstructure, right? I'll have to just go, I have questions in mind, I have to just go collect data, sit and write and finish it. It can happen very fast, quickly. But it all depends if our research proposal has been thoroughly debated, discussed, we have gone through what possibly could be the challenges while writing the thesis. Therefore, I always emphasize from what you just said, right? A good research proposal is extremely important for a PhD. I mean, universities generally give you, say, 1 month, 2 months to submit a research proposal. But I would emphasize that if a good amount of time out of 3 years of your PhD, if you devote, say, 1.5 years writing a good research proposal, it will take not more than 6 months to finish the PhD.
Okay. All right. So that would be a wrap up for us, sir. And I would like to conclude by summarizing the points which sir so deliberately mentioned to us during this virtual conference. Yes, a well-written research proposal minimizes your tiring efforts and helps you in building a strong thesis. Research is a social activity, so interest is in the first place to actually concluding a good thesis. Then it is time critical, and because research is not for self advertisement, choice of different methodologies is very pertinent. And introduction is important because it lays the mental roadmap, thus leading to 4 basic questions. What am I studying? Why topic is important? What do I know about this topic? And how will the study help me in new ways of understanding? Besides this, also elaborated on the structure and the writing style, and how a good writing is the most simplistic, but that's where you need more practice, because simple writing is the most difficult to do actually. And then how hypothesis and hypothesis testing especially depend on the variables. Dependent and independent variables are very important for that. So thank you, sir. It was a very informative session, and I'm sure most of our scholars and me also got so many points from your lecture here. And Rui ma'am, would you want to thank sir for coming up and giving his time for us?
Thank you, Devika. So I would like to thank Professor Dr. Manish for giving him his precious time and guiding all the academicians and scholars who are present here. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening the session and helping us to solve many problems which were there in our mind related to research project writing and data analysis related to your topics. So thank you so much. We look forward to you for any other session. If you will plan in future, will be remain associated with you. So thank you so much for your time and your efforts.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to interact with all these young scholars. In fact, with the type of questions which these young scholars actually ask, we also get a lot of food for thought. So thank you for having me for this session, and certainly I'll be available in future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I have an important note for the participants. So, participants, please note that there will be one feedback cum assessment form that will be circulated at the end of each day, and you must submit it by the next day by 12 p.m. Attendance online participation would be for the attendance online participation would be considered for attendance, and participants shall receive their e-certificates only on successful completion of the assessment and other workshop formalities. So 80% attendance is mandatory. I hope we get 100% though. So once again, thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. And the whole day one was amazing. It was a very great learning experience for us. Thank you, Ruhi ma'am. Thank you, Dharmendra sir.
So we request to close the meeting for the day.
Thank you, Devika.
Feedback form will be shared through WhatsApp also. In the participants WhatsApp, you can fill there as well, and you can submit. That is very important because your attendance will be counted on the basis of the feedback form you will fill and your attendance, which is recorded here in Zoom meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Can I end this session?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, please.